I'm Pete Hammond.
I'm Todd McCarthy.
And this is Take Two. And our Take Two today is on the Oscar nominations, which were just revealed this week and much anticipated. We've been talking about these movies and will they be nominated, will they not be nominated since Cannes last year, one after another. And now it's finally out. And so we're going to do a deep dive into it, Todd, today to talk about this. And I wanted to, when I wrote about them when they came out, I talked about how I wasn't that surprised by it. I looked at the list of 10 movies, which they now nominate absolutely 10. And I go like, none of them really surprised me because I've heard about them over and over from other groups and things like that. You might say All Quiet on the Western Front was a surprise to a lot of people because it's a German movie. Germany's entry to the international race. So, okay, fine. It's definitely going to be a front runner there. It'll get into that race. We all knew that. But I kept talking to Academy members, and when I asked them what they liked, this movie across the board comes up of those who had seen it. And I heard no negative things. And then I began to think, this is going to be a player beyond international, All Quiet on the Western Front. It's going to be to the film editors, to the cinematographers, to the music branch. It's got all the great filmmaking tropes in it that appeal to the Academy members, I think. And the only surprise to me with that in the end was that it didn't get a Best Director nomination.
It's very
9
strange.
nominations, though.
Yeah, I was amazed. I mean, I kind of looked at it out of curiosity. I never expected that it was going to be, a contender because no one was talking about it and no one was showing it widely or anything.
Even Netflix, which had it, was pushing Bardo and other movies.
Oh, big time, yeah. But so I was really, and maybe this worked in its favor, I was surprised how absolutely riveting it was from the very beginning. And by the end, I thought, damn, this is one of the best films of the year for sure.
Yeah, you have said that repeatedly in past conversations we've had here, that you really liked it.
Absolutely, yeah, I did.
It did sort of take you by surprise.
Yeah, because it was a wonderful surprise, actually, because I think it's quite a remarkable film. So it's encouraging that something like that can happen.
It is. And, just last week before the nominations, BAFTA, British Academy, announced their nominations, and it got 14.
Oof.
So you knew something
that says something, yeah.
Something within the industry, within the film professionals recognized that immediately. And the interesting thing about All Quiet on the Western Front, it isn't that Netflix wasn't behind it. They were very much behind it, but they didn't take it to any of the fall festivals. It was like a lot of their other movies were popping at Venice or Toronto or, Telluride or places like that.
Well, do you think it was a stealth campaign that they were going to sneak up gradually, or do you think they really didn't have a clue that it would be this well received?
I think they were very much behind it and thought they could get an international nomination for international film. I think they knew that because they showed it. I saw it very early on, kind of like by myself, I think, over at Netflix, as I recall, in the early fall. So they were showing it, they were behind it, but they had a different strategy for it than maybe some of their other films, which were higher profile. This is a remake of obviously a Best Picture winner already.
And it doesn't have big stars or anything like that.
No big stars. Edward Berger's the director. He's a very good director, but he's not
known at all.
Alejandro Iñárritu. He's not even Noah Baumbach. They had White Noise too that they were pushing at Venice and different things. So they had bigger fish to fry. But then, you know what? This is the power of seeing these movies. When you sit down and see the movie, things happen. That's the ultimate litmus test, obviously, in making something like this happen. It's interesting to me that there were so few surprises, like I said to me. And I think it's because all the critics groups, there's so many of them now, the South Florida Western Front of New York Critics Associations and all these things, they all put out their list. They all tend to follow each other with 1 or 2 movies that they put on the map. We see this with all the trade ads and what the studios and the distributors decide to promote. So we know these are the movies. To sneak in a small little movie onto the Best Picture list is very difficult. You're up against these machines that are pushing these movies.
I'm wondering if the increased membership and an increase in the number of people voting has had some influence or made a decisive difference in the films that get nominated. Because I don't know how you figure that out, but it's definitely the constituency and the way a few films got in here in different categories that I wouldn't have expected, and you certainly wouldn't have seen them a few years ago. I just wonder, because you follow the Oscars so closely, how much do you think these rule changes and the new kinds of people who've come into the Academy has influenced what ends up being nominated?
Well, it's an excellent question, because there are now 10,000-ish voting
as
members.
Opposed to
that's
what,
double
5 years
of
ago?
5 years ago.
Right.
You know, I mean, really, they made a plan to expand the Academy globally. These nominations, they claim, came from members in 80 countries. So we're dealing with a very international group that wasn't there in the big numbers that they are now.
Yeah.
The director's branch used to be like 300 and change and something. Now it's almost 600. And a lot of those new directors there are international. They're from all over the world. So that's why every year now we have seen at least one international director steal a spot, you know, from somebody.
And I think it partly too is the fact that in the old days, to see foreign films, you had to probably go to the Academy or catch it at a Lumley House or something like that. And now it may be kind of down in your pile of DVDs or something, or the things you're going to watch online. Yeah. But it makes it much easier to access some of these, let's say, less known films. And if something is really outstanding, like All Quiet on the Western Front, it can go up to the top.
And the Academy has a digital screening room. They call it a platform now. Yeah. All the members have access to it. For the bigger movies, for the general movies, they charge $20,000 to get on that platform. So you still, if you're a tiny micro movie, you still have to fork over the money. But for foreign language, they have the whole foreign language committee that can access movies there, and they don't charge for those, at least for that group that is voting on that, are for documentaries. But it is key in making these movies seen. So let's take an example. How Cannes has become very important here. Triangle of Sadness, I know your favorite movie of the year. Triangle of Sadness got Best Picture, Director, and Writing, all for Ruben Östlund, a Swedish director, doing his English language debut. And it really appealed to the core filmmaking group here in the Academy.
Yeah.
And why do you think that is with a picture like that? What set it apart from these other films?
Well, I'm maybe the wrong person to answer that, because I really disliked the film. I thought it was just a typical story of the working class or the oppressed people suddenly getting the upper hand. It's something we've seen a lot. And so it's kind of inexplicable to me because I'm not a fan of the film. But I guess there's something about that process of the tables turning that people really respond to, even if they've seen it before.
I thought it was outrageous comedy in many parts of it, about the class system and just stuff. And he just went for it. And it reminded me of a foreign voice, of somebody outside of America with a strong kind of comment on things like that. And I left that movie and I immediately started saying this, and I've said it 10 times if I said it once, Billy Wilder would have loved this movie. And I think it's borne out by its writing nominations and its directing nominations. If Billy Wilder was still alive, I guarantee you he'd be voting for this movie. There's a certain appeal that this film has.
But maybe even more of an unusual case, and something that might not have happened before, is Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
I don't think in the what we call the old days of the Oscars that film would have stood a chance.
No way.
And this one also found a way to, sneak into the Oscar race and then become a major factor, I think.
Well, it started at a film festival that is not known for launching Oscar movies, South by Southwest. Basically, studios go there with their big commercial movies that are coming out in the spring. That's the big thing out of there. And then there's these smaller films, indie films. But at South by, I can't recall the last time they've launched a Best Picture nominee, particularly one that is the front runner in terms of nominations. 11 nominations for this film, 11.
Astounding.
Well, as it went along, it became a hit movie, a surprise hit for A24 that just built and built and built. $100 million, 150, I think, globally now. It's extraordinary the way younger audiences latch on, but still, the Academy is still skews older, and they also have to watch it on their digital platform. And I had heard of some instances where they're turning it off, they don't understand it, the older members, because it's about multiverse and it's going all over the place. And nevertheless, it clearly hit a nerve and it did really well there. And I think the critics groups they can thank them for this. That's what I said in my column when I wrote about it. I said, you can thank the critics for this movie, because if you look at where it's won Best Film, I counted up at least 20, 25 critics groups around the country, named it Best Picture and gave it everything under the sun. And then the Critics' Choice Awards, just as voting was going on, gave it 5 awards, including Best Picture, and that was televised. And so you have a lot of things. Also, the BAFTA nominated in big time. So it's not just a thing here.
Well, we're speaking about people who've got nominations that maybe we wouldn't even heard of a year ago. But why, given that this film got some nominations, why do you think Tom Cruise was not nominated?
Well, I think they take Tom Cruise for granted. I think it's a big movie star, and they look at him playing a role. This is what John Wayne was always up against. Well, he's John Wayne. They look at him here, obviously 36 years before he played this role, Maverick, in Top Gun. Here he is doing it again. And the movie's the biggest hit of the year. All of this goes into it. And they say, yeah, but he's Tom Cruise, And I don't think they realized how difficult it is to pick up a character 36 years later and actually top yourselves.
True enough.
I think he so deserved a nomination. Instead, they went out of their way to nominate Paul Mescal for that 5th slot, I call it, in the actor race, who's a fine actor in a movie that nobody's seen called After Sun that critics loved. And that brought attention to it. And so he gets the nomination here for this tiny little movie. And Tom Cruise is up for producing Top Gun. It's up for 6 awards, Best Picture. He will get celebrated in that way. But
the same could be said for Avatar, because, James Cameron didn't get nominated, and some of these other people that snuck in, it's amazing that they...
Clearly, Avatar directed itself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? James Cameron, what did he have to do with it? That is the...
It's mystifying.
Of the Oscars that bugs me no end. I called for it again when I wrote my analysis of this year's nominations. They need to up the ante in the directors category. They did it for film. There's 10 films. They are telling us 5 of those movies the director had little to do with, because there's no way that in the Best Director category, 5 of those Best Picture nominees will have a chance to be nominated. I say expand that director category to 10, or automatically include the director with the nomination for Best Picture like they do for international film. It's the director that gets that award, even though their name isn't on it. It's the country. Why not do that with the Best Picture category and just say, okay, the director is also like the producer and they all get the credit, or at least make them 10 nominees, give them an even playing field, a chance to be nominated for that. Because right now we don't. Only 5 are going to get nominated for one of the 10 pictures.
Now, looking at Everything Everywhere, do you think there's a split among people who really, really love it and maybe some that wouldn't like it as much? So that
I think there's somebody described it as a war in the academy between the over 45 set and the under 45. But the Academy's trying to get a little younger, but they're still at least 60% over the age of 50 or 45. 60. Yeah. So I would say that group maybe doesn't get it a little bit. It's a cross between a Marvel film with all the multiverse stuff, and it's got a lot to say. It's directed by these 2 young guys, the Daniels. They're both named Daniel. Their previous film was, a smaller little movie, and then they just exploded with this one. And it's very unusual to see it happen. A movie that opened in March, first of all. 4 of the movies opened in the first half of the year. That's unusual, too.
Very much
Top Gun,
so.
Elvis, all these movies came out in the first half. How often do we see that?
Well, and another one that I think had a bit of a roller coaster is Spielberg's film, Fablemans.
Yes.
Because it opened with huge reaction at the Toronto Film Festival, massive success. And then pretty good reviews, but then somehow it seemed to kind of sink a little bit and not be
Box
quite as
office
well.
was not what
No,
people
it
expected.
didn't really register the way we thought it was, and yet now that seems to be maybe coming back a little bit. What do you think the Fablemans' chances are?
I think it's a very interesting thing about Fablemans because BAFTA, which came out a week ago, almost totally ignored it.
Yeah.
All it got was one nomination for screenplay, which is Spielberg and Tony Kushner, but no director, none of that. That was a surprise to me. And I've heard of members, and I've heard of people out there that just don't love it, which is funny because when it first came at Toronto and everything else, all you heard of this is the obvious front runner for the Oscar, which leads me to say never be the obvious front runner for the Oscar because you're only going to go down. That's just what always seems to happen. But I do think it's now made a resurgence thanks to the Oscars. 7 nominations, but it's in all the important categories: picture, director, screenplay. And John Williams became the oldest nominee in history with his 53rd nomination for his score for the Fablemans.
Wait a minute. How do you do that?
It's really
That's incredible.
Amazing. And then he said, and he always said, this is going to be my last score. Not a
Spielberg.
Well, actually, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the next one with 80-year-old Harrison Ford. Yeah. This is going to be his last score. And now he's backtracking on that and say, well, I'm not so sure I'm going to retire. You got to love this guy. He's amazing.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And I think Spielberg, I still think no matter what happens with Everything Everywhere and all of that, I still think he's a front runner for director. I think it's a real director's movie. It's a personal movie. I think they might, if they don't even vote for it for Best Picture, they may separate this out as a directorial achievement.
So one film we really haven't talked about as much as some of the others is Tar.
Yes.
Now, Tar has won a lot of critics awards in different categories. It
swept the New York critics, the LA critics, I believe, and the National Society of Critics, which are a lot of the same critics are in all those groups.
And feeling like at the moment it's almost taken for granted because it's just been kind of a cakewalk for them. But with the Oscars, you never know. But it's a film that's really gotten great support. And, it's hard to fault it, really. I don't think there's a big negative contingent against it.
No, I don't think so.
What do you think its chances are to actually go all the way?
I don't see it winning Best Picture just because it's a smaller kind of thing here and it's solid. But look, it's his first film in 16 years, Todd Field. He's up for directing. He's up for writing. He's up for producing. It's got editing. It got cinematography, which really surprised me.
That surprised me, too.
I didn't see that coming at all. In fact, Top Gun did not get nominated for cinematography, and I thought that was a slam dunk to win. And so there's a thing going on with Tar, and that could be. And I ran into a producer friend of mine who's an Oscar-winning producer. I just happenstance ran into him last week, and he said, well, my favorite movie of the year is Tar. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And he said, but there's another movie out there that everyone's talking about, too. And I said, what's that? And he goes, Top Gun Maverick. And I go like, yeah, I've heard of it. But so I do think there's going to be with their voting system, which means you got to do your preference, your favorite, your second favorite, your third favorite, that your number 2 favorite could be as important as the number 1. So there'll be a lot of number 1s for Tar. I'm not so sure a lot of number 2s. I think it's got a fanatical following that loves the movie and will vote for it, but maybe not some other people.
Do you think Cate Blanchett has any possibility at all not to win? Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, every time there's a possibility not to win, there's a lot of love for Michelle Yeoh. You got to look at all these nominations from the actors for that movie, Everything Everywhere. I mean, 4 of the actors are in there, which means that's the biggest branch by far, which means they're really supporting it. Obviously, Kate's nominated there too. And I do think she's the front runner by far. But, there's always a chance that momentum. I always say Oscar races are all about momentum at the time. We're a month away from even the voting being close to starting. So let's see what happens. Things change, and we've seen that in recent years. This race can go. We haven't seen any of the industry groups yet put out their wins, and that is always telling the producers, the directors. SAG is a month away. That's very important. Let's see where they go to before we can state that this is an absolute sure thing. But in that Best Actress race, You have one of the most interesting things I've seen in decades at the Oscars. Andrea Riseborough for To Leslie, a movie I bet you haven't seen.
No.
I have, only because her PR firm badgered me. We're doing this campaign. It's very stealth. We have no money. She's paying for it. All this stuff. We're going to send you a link. And then I heard from a couple of actors, oh my God, I just saw this. It went right to the top of my Best Actress list. I'm going, what is this? And I watch it. She's brilliant. She's wonderful. She's a British actress playing American. It's a great role. It's something actors love. They had an underground campaign, a lot of big names, Charlize Theron, Demi Moore, Kate Winslet said it's the greatest performance she's ever seen on film. They kept telling their friends, and they call up their friends, you got to see this movie. They spent, I guess, $20,000 to get on the Academy viewing platform so they could see it there, because this is not in theaters or anywhere. The whole budget of this movie isn't that. The whole total worldwide gross is $27,000. So, I mean, this is a real guerrilla campaign for Andrea Riseborough, and she got nominated.
It's extraordinary. Speaking of the actress category, I was actually pleased that Ana de Armas got nominated because she's terrific, but the film is not almost hateful. I mean,
in fact, the Razzie Award nominations came out, and it got 8 nominations.
But it's amazing that you could separate the actress from the rest of the film, but because she's in the film all the time.
Yeah.
But it is an extraordinary performance in a film that's deeply unlikable.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? How many times does that happen? Not often.
No.
You know, generally, and it's its only nomination. But I have to say, when you're playing an icon, she isn't even the first person to be nominated for an Oscar for playing Marilyn Monroe.
Well, that's a different story. Yeah.
Michelle Williams, who is nominated this year for The Fablemans against her, was nominated for My Week with Marilyn and did a great job too. And Elvis is nominated this year too. And Austin Butler playing Elvis Presley, and everybody goes, "Oh my God, he's brilliant!" And he is. He's brilliant. But so you have Elvis and Marilyn nominated. Neither one of them were ever nominated for an Oscar, and now they're both going to the Oscars for people playing them.
Yeah, another case where I'm surprised that the Elvis film has even done as well as it has, because I think it was a deeply flawed film, and the Tom Hanks role is not correct as far as I'm concerned. I think a lot of people feel that way.
He got nominated for a Razzie for that.
Well, yeah. So I'm a little.
I thought he did a good job, but
well, but the fact that in both of these films, Ana de Armas and then in Elvis, the lead actors could let's say step above the rest of the situation.
The movie,
films that are not entirely liked.
Yeah, well, the movie actually did spectacularly well for Warner Brothers. It was a big box office hit. I liked it a lot. It was at Cannes, as was Top Gun, by the way. All these.
Well, that's the thing with Tom Cruise. The momentum you thought would have carried him all the way through, but it didn't.
Yeah, well, it carried him to a Best Picture nomination, his first ever as a producer.
Yeah.
And he could well win there, because like I said, there's a lot of things. But to get to Elvis, it's interesting. It got 8 nominations for Baz Luhrmann, 8 nominations, but no directing, no writing, one acting, one lead acting, and then sound, production design, costume design, makeup, and one other. Guess what? In 2001, Baz Luhrmann's Moulin Rouge got 8 nominations, 1 lead actor, Nicole Kidman, no directing, no writing,
that's funny.
Picture, and the exact same categories that Elvis is in.
That's remarkable.
Isn't that amazing? It is 20 years later in this Academy that we say has changed so much, but maybe it hasn't changed.
I think it has, but yeah, certainly there's. It's good to see that happen once in a while. I mean, it's remarkable.
It's wild. It's wild. What's your favorite of the 10 nominees that we've been talking about?
Well, we're going to have to...
we'll look at the list here, and they hand you these lists. All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't talk about the Banshees of Inisherin.
Well,
you told me when you saw it.
I was about to get to that. I mean, I would say Banshees has hung in there. It's got acting nominations across the board. It's a smaller film, and I don't know if everyone likes it as much as a lot of us do.
Right.
So I'm not convinced that it would win Best Picture. It could, but I think there's room for someone else to sneak through too.
Yeah.
So I think it'll get something. I think it'll get at least 1 or 2 Oscar nominations for acting. I don't know which ones, but probably will.
Well, it has 4 nominated.
Exactly.
So Kerry Condon, Brendan Gleeson, Barry Cogan, and of course Colin Farrell in lead.
Yeah. So I think that's right up there, but I don't think it's a lock, and I don't. Right now, there's a lot of shifting sands, I think, with who's going to win this year.
There are, and there's little things. The only one we haven't talked about of the 10 nominees is the one with the smallest number of nominations, which is 2. One of them happens to be Best Picture. The other for Best Adapted Screenplay, Sarah Polley's Women Talking. And that made it to the Best Picture list.
I don't know how that happened. Yeah, because it's a really small film, and I think there's some group of people that really don't like it, and I think but apparently there are enough people that did. That was the biggest surprise to me that got.
Was that your big number one surprise?
I think so, that it got the ones that it did get.
Yeah,
because those are tough categories.
I know, and look, speaking of women, The Woman King, which had a major campaign. They were out there everywhere with Viola Davis and Gina Prince Bythewood. We've seen them everywhere on this. Got 0, zippo, not a single nomination, which that was almost the biggest surprise to me. I think not even Terrence Blanchard's score, which I think is the best score he's ever done, got recognized here. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. No, there's some perplexing things like that, but the Fablemans also. I'm not sure who is not liking it that much. I mean, because
that's a good question.
It did seem like a sure thing when it came out of Toronto.
Right.
But now it's a little mezzo.
I wonder, when you're as successful as Steven Spielberg is, that some people resent it and maybe go against the tide. James Cameron, we talked about, is not nominated as a director either at the DGA or at the Oscars.
That's very surprising.
Maybe he's just too successful, making too much money here, proving that, you can do Avatar 2 13 years later and make it bigger than.
But we can withhold something. Yeah.
So he is nominated for Best Picture, as a producer, but it only got 4 nominations.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to win, any of the big awards. But I mean, it deserved to be in the top 10. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I think it'll win special visual effects.
I would think so.
How could it not? Yeah. Really? I mean, just the efforts that have gone into that movie. It's amazing.
But at the critics' dinner a couple of weeks ago in Los Angeles, it felt to me like Tar was really liked a lot. But then with the Academy, maybe not quite so much.
Well, it's a different group. The Academy, of course, is professionals, their peers, and the critics are the critics, and they anoint what they like. I think the critics groups did exceptionally well this year in matching the Academy. That's why, again, I go back to, I'm not that surprised here, because I think we've seen a lot of these movies on all these lists, and critics have championed most of them. Even Top Gun is like 96% on Rotten Tomatoes and things.
But if there's going to be a surprise Best Picture winner,
it's going to be that.
Yeah,
would be the surprise.
Which you better say the title. Oh, really? You think that could?
I do. You know why? I think it's because the Academy has this voting system where you have to say your first favorite, second, third, and fourth. And a lot of people don't understand how that works. But anyway, that's the way it works. Mm-hmm. So your favorite could be Tar, but your number 2 will be Top Gun. There's nobody that doesn't like Top Gun, but more importantly, there's nobody in the Academy that doesn't thank Tom Cruise and Jerry Bruckheimer for bringing back movies.
Well, was it Grand Hotel? We got Best Picture,
one nomination.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who would have guessed that? So maybe we're in a situation, if you get only 2 or 3 nominations, you could still get.
Yeah, well, Top Gun has 6. I think it's going to win for film editing. I think it's going to win for sound. I think those 2 are going to win. I can't guarantee in the other categories. It importantly, though, is nominated and just got nominated for a Writers Guild Award as well, and a USC Scripter Award for its screenplay. That doesn't happen with movies like Top Gun.
Well, the other thing I'm wondering about is a film that I don't like, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Yeah. Clearly, tons of people do. How much of a chance do you think that has to go all the way?
Well, I think, again, the guilds are going to tell us something about that with the momentum it can gather. But it's up for the Ensemble Award at SAG, and that propelled Parasite and Coda into Best Picture wins. The sheer enthusiasm of that whole cast and everything, the actors
Well, that's
getting
just
behind it.
Yeah, it has a big rabid fan base.
That could win there, like.
But they're not all voters. But
I
still.
know. And we don't have Top Gun in that race at all. We have women talking and Fablemans and stuff like that. If anything but everything wins in the ensemble category at SAG, then I think it's a wide open race. If it wins there, more importantly, if it wins at the Producers Guild, then we've got the Mack truck running over the field here. And I think voters, even if they don't get it or they don't like it, some voters, I want to be hip, I want to be right. They want to vote for what they think's going to win. And there are voters like that.
Now, to look at a slightly bigger picture of things, the Oscar ratings were dropping.
Yes.
And then there was a fiasco with the Will Smith, all that stuff last year.
And Emancipation completely ignored here.
Well, and that's one film I wanted to mention because, it wasn't widely received, it wasn't widely seen, I don't think. I mean, at least among, filmgoers. Yeah. But to me, one person really got gypped because I think Robert Richardson's cinematography is the best of the year.
Yeah.
I think it was fantastic, but nothing from that film is going to be.
I don't think they were going to go near it.
No,
I've said that repeatedly. I said it when we talked about Emancipation here. I just don't think the industry wants it. And I think it was too soon. I think they should have held it. Cinematography is an interesting category this year because the one I thought was going to win, Claudia Miranda for Top Gun, it didn't even get nominated. So go figure. In fact, the list for cinematographers differs widely from the ASC list, the Guild for Cinematography. So it's interesting, but I did not expect Emancipation to come up with anything. And Will was out there campaigning a little bit. He was doing Q&As and stuff like that. And
still, it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, but Robert Richardson's work, I think Will sort of killed its chances a year ago at the Oscars. But
I would say anyone who's seriously interested in the cinema per se should see it at least just to see that cinematography.
Well, I
it's
think
an incredible job.
Anything Robert Richardson
does.
He's a brilliant cinematographer. Definitely. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and everything else.
No, he's really great.
Is extraordinary. And there are those that don't make it on the list. That's the sad fact of the Oscars. And people still argue about it. And as I say, people keep giving the obits for the Oscars. No. When you die and you're an Oscar nominee or an Oscar winner, the first line in your obit is only going to be Academy Award winner or nominee. It's not going to be National Society of Film Critics winner. It's going to be the Oscars. It's still the litmus test for this, no matter what it's gone through. And I think it will continue to. There's much more to talk about at the Oscars as the race goes on, and we will do that. For now, I'm Pete Hammond.
Todd McCarthy.
And this has been Take Two.